Inviting me. I don't know how much you know about Greek archaeology, but I hope that by the end you're going to be able to that you will know some more things. So the aim of today and this lecture, well, I hopefully anyway, I will focus on the importance of the study of the organic remains, and we're talking about the archaeobotanical data, for the reconstruction of ancient economy and agriculture, a field which is not very often studied in classical archaeology, but also in other historical periods. You don't have many plant remains or archaeobotanical studies from the Iron Age or the Archaic, and if we go further, the Hellenistic period for the Roman and the Byzantine periods, there is none. So there is a lack there in Greece. And I will start there. I will start by mentioning where the information is coming from until now, and what are the major models of classical agriculture and economy. I will also go into the current views on the habitation patterns and the relationship between the city and the countryside. And the second part of the lecture will focus on new approaches, and I hope that's going to be more interesting for you, on 4 case studies, all dated to the Hellenistic period and the northern part of Greece. 3 of the sites are located in the countryside, so they're country houses, and the 4th is a building from an urban context. So there would be potential comparison between the rural sites, but also the countryside and the urban center. And hopefully, I will show you how plant remains contribute to the understanding of the everyday and the economic and social development of the site. And you need to have in mind, and I hope that you will see that by the end, that this is the core of the archaeobotanical studies. That's why we are doing them. We're not doing them to provide a list of species. We need to actually interpret what we're finding in economical and social level. So let's see what's the situation in Greece up to now, where classical archaeology has been widely criticized for a lack of integration of the various components of material culture when interpreting the results of excavation programs. In most cases, the focus has been mainly on the public monuments, temples, and burial sites, leaving the analysis of the domestic and the everyday completely unexplored. It has been the norm that domestic architecture and artifacts have been approached as isolated and decontextualized objects, undermining the aim of identifying and interpreting human activities undertaken within the house's space. For houses located within cities, reconstruction of domestic activities have been attempted at different levels at sites such as Olynthus and Halys, just to mention 2 of the well-studied cases. And at Olynthus, long after the excavation and the relevant publications, the initial publications were in the 30s and the 50s, Cahill tried to contextualize, put the finds in an appropriate location, and actually he tried all these small symbols that you see there. He tried to put what was found in every room, so he could actually interpret and reconstruct domestic activities and the use of space. But this kind of work, putting everything into a context, hasn't been actually the focus of classical archaeology until recently. More recently, even like 2 years ago, efforts have been made to address a set of questions concerning household organization with a focus on specific activities, and I'm referring to the work of undertaken at the Athenian Agora, where they are trying to reconstruct weaving activities on the basis of loom weight. So there is a big project there that they are targeting at the moment. The situation is worse when we move outside the urban limits. Although the countryside had a major role in the production of food and its own political, social, and ritual structures, it has been until recently largely unexplored, lacking research originated by major excavation programs and science-based archaeological methodologies. As a result, agricultural and economic practices have been mainly approached through the written sources, specific kinds of archaeological material from excavations, regional surveys, and the ethnographic record. But let's see those separately. Referring to the written sources, they generally concern the upper strata of the society, those involved in legal cases, mortgages of land and similar situations. In addition, most of the information available concerns the large urban centers again, especially Athens, and therefore the paucity of written sources from the rural, the farming areas of Greece does not allow for a closer investigation of agricultural systems and patterns in the countryside. Attempts have been made to fill the gaps of knowledge by drawing from Roman written sources. However, the geographical and chronological difference between classical Greece and late Republican Italy has to be taken into account. Another approach towards the reconstruction of the ancient economy is the archaeological record itself. Various excavated sites, such as Athens, Olynthus that I mentioned, Corinth, have provided information about agricultural practices and production. And specific types of archaeological materials, such as pithy and amphorae agricultural installations, such as treating vats for production of wine, presses and mills for the production of olive oil, pictorial representations on pottery and agricultural tools, suggest specific agricultural activities. Sorry. And since we're talking about, since we're talking about excavations, the ultimate character of a farmhouse situated in the countryside until recently was mainly based on the excavations of the Vari and the Dima houses found in Attica. But this was excavated 40 years ago. So 40 years ago or 50 years ago, and now we haven't actually until now excavated full farmhouses. We have located in different surveys, or they were partly excavated, but we haven't excavated farmhouses in a complete farmhouse. This set of information has become stronger with regional survey, aerial photography, and satellite imagery, the latter helping specifically in the identification of ancient field systems. Intensive surveys have made huge progress in methodology, covering many areas of Greece, and have reached the point where rural landscapes are starting to tell their own story for their organization, farming strategies, and population change. These surveys have documented permanent individual rural structures with economic implications towards settlement patterns at the countryside. However, apart from the general information and trends of the field surveys, research on agricultural, economic, and social development of specific sites and regions cannot be approached in a holistic manner. Lastly, the ethnographic record, the study of traditional farming and husbandry practices, offer analogies for the past, but they cannot be used as definite facts, but only as suggestions for the better understanding of a past that has been lost. And talking about ancient agriculture, the production of food in a specific area and period of time is determined by the physical environment of the region in combination with economic, social, and political structures that determine the availability of food resources. It is generally accepted that farmers in ancient Greece were self-sufficient and produced what they needed themselves. However, farmers could not avoid looking outside the farm for the good sources they required on a regular or occasional basis, depending on the resources, the potential, and the environmental setting of the farm. It has been argued that self-sufficiency was not the goal only for the small producers, but it was also an important element of the wealthy elite. Two models focusing on the relationship between farming and animal husbandry, with further implications to broader agricultural practices, economic activities, and social relationships have proposed different routes for the interpretation of ancient agriculture. According to the first one, agriculture was practiced in biennial cycle, where cereal crops were alternated with bare fallow. Bare fallow includes plowing of weeds before they set seed, and therefore this method would have limited weed growth and have resulted to the accumulated 2 years moisture of the field for the succeeding cereal crop of the next year. The cereal bare fallow rotation would have resulted to the scarcity of lowland grazing sources, forcing in turn the livestock to move to other areas for seeking food. This model also supports the development of seasonal transhumance of sheep and goats, with additionally compelled by the arid environment of the lowlands turned to cooler and lusher places of the highlands. The removal of the livestock from the lowlands would have resulted in unavailability of manure for a long period. Consequently, this model corresponds with a divorce of arable farming and pastoralism present in traditional economies of Greece and other Mediterranean countries. More recently, a second approach has cast doubt to the previous one, and it is in favor of the symbiosis of animal husbandry and arable agriculture. According to this second model, advocated mainly by Hodgson and Paul Halstead, agriculture and animal husbandry were organized during the classical period as integrated parts in an intensive farming system involving the cultivation of fodder crops, manuring, and crop rotation. Emphasis is given to the rotation of cereals and pulses, which result in the availability of fodder in the lowlands during summer. This availability of fodder would in turn prevent the seasonal movement of the animals, which would consume weeds and produce manure, enhancing at the same time the fertility and productivity of the land. The first system is connected with nucleated settlements, plough agriculture, and is documented by the extensive cultivation of distant fields, in which cereals alternate with bare fallow. This is a labor-saving tactic that rules out the widespread cultivation of the more intensive cereal pulse rotation. In turn, pulses are often restricted to intensively worked field gardens. And according to the second model, dispersed settlements of villages and farms are located closer to the arable land, practicing small-scale intensive farming involving regular manuring and cereal pulse rotation. In the case of distant plots, it would not have been possible to graze their small herds in their own arable land. In contrast, with plots located closer to the dispersed settlements, herding at the household level would be more practicable. Integration of crop and livestock would in turn make manure more freely available and so reinforce the viability of intensive farming. Was that too much? Did you get it? Yes? No? I'll do it again. I'll do it again. What I tried to say with this, like 2 pages or something, is that you have you want to cultivate cereals, okay, and you have fields that they are not close to the sites. So you go to distant fields and you leave you have cereal cultivation for 1 year, you leave it for another year, and then you go back, okay. So that means that you don't have to go there all the time. It's a little bit relaxed. So this is one case. But then, because you don't have the weeds, okay, because you plow the weeds before they actually grow, what are the animals going to eat? What are they going to graze? So they have to move the animals from the lowlands where the cereal cultivation is, and put them in a different, nicer place where they can find something to eat. So one model is that, and this is this is connected with nucleated settlements. You don't have they're all over the place because the land is not all over the place. Okay, they are distant fields from where you live. So there is, for the first model, you have you have agriculture, and then you have pastoralism. There are 2 different things. You do it in different time, and they're not interconnected. Okay, and then you have the other model, and it's good that I explained that to you because I can see in your eyes that it didn't go very well. But anyway, so you have the other model that they say, okay, we want to have cereal cultivation because this is the main thing, okay? So, but instead of having them away and leave it bare for 1 year, we're going to actually rotate it with pulses, which are very, very good for the pulses get a lot of nitrogen in the soil, so it's good for the fertility. Okay, so when you have there and you go and you manure the field, which is closer to actually to the actual sites, it's a form of an intensive agriculture. You go there often, and you don't leave it for 1 year and then you go back. Okay, you're there, you're doing things. So you have an intensive model, and because there you will have, you grow fodder crops as well. Fodder crops is the crops that actually aim for animals, okay, which is mainly pulses, but also barley as well. And then you have the fodder crops. You have the weeds. The animals can feed on them. So you don't want to, you don't need to go around the mountains to find food for the animals. So in that model, the animals and the cereal cultivation goes together. Eh? Excellent. Good. So there. Another major issue, and I hope that I'm not going to have to stop and do it again, but let's see, is connected with agriculture and occupation patterns. Intensive agricultural activity and land use is the discussion of the permanent or seasonal occupation of the farmhouses from the classical and Hellenistic periods. Permanent rural occupation has been approached as an indication of labor-intensive land use, and the permanent character and use of agricultural buildings has been questioned on the basis of epigraphic documents, mainly leases from Attica, but also from other areas, and is shown that substantial buildings in the countryside were not, or at least not in general, primary residential. And before I have to go back, I'll say it now. Why is it important to see if this is permanent or seasonal? Or why the farmhouses and their occupation patterns are connected to agricultural activity? Because if you have structures in the countryside, you have it for a reason. And that reason is possibly the intensive character of the agriculture that you're actually having. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to be or to stay in the country house all year round, okay? So it is important to know or to try to understand if we have permanent or seasonal occupation, because it's not only because they liked it there or not, they were doing something there. And this issue of permanent and seasonal occupation has been approached through regional survey of classical Attica, and it has been argued that in many rural structures, oil mills and presses, threshing floors, and other agricultural installations are found, and pointing towards a permanent, rather a seasonal use of farm buildings. And that possibly intensive farming was practiced in classical Attica, where farms are connected with agricultural, of these agricultural installations and extensive terraces groups. It has also been proposed by Hallstatt that these buildings could be used as storage space for agricultural equipment and agricultural produce, such as fodder. And this seems to be a sufficiently compelling reason for building substantial structures without having any intention of leaving them for any length of time. So you might ask, how on earth are we going to know if it's permanent or seasonal? Well, it doesn't help only with the archaeology, I think, to me anyway, with only the archaeological finds. And I hope that you will see that the plant remains might have to do something and add something to that. It has been also proposed that an argument for residency is the presence of the graves near the farmhouses, as it would not be logical for burials to be located near the farmhouses unless the occupants spent a large time of their lives there. In return, and in the course of the same debate, Hallstatt argued that graves are not necessarily indicative of permanent occupation, but merely respond to the need of people to bury their dead, and there as a marker to stake a claim to the land. It remains a challenge, as I said, to demonstrate that rural sites identified by surveys mostly were permanent farmstead. And I say mostly by surveys because we don't have a lot of excavated farmhouses in Greece anyway. So, and I hope we'll add to that today. But let's see some of the key issues of interest on the agriculture and economy. Based, and we're seeking information based on what I said to now. What did they cultivate and how? Were they performing extensive or intensive agriculture? Did they produce for self-sufficiency or they produced for the market? What was the character of the farmhouses located in the countryside? Were they large estates or they're small agricultural households? And were they inhabited all year round? You heard a lot about that, or it was seasonally occupied. And how were they managed, these farmhouses, these country houses, and how can we reconstruct the everyday? These are only, of course, some of the issues, but on the basis of the information package I just mentioned, which is the written source, the ethnographic record, the archaeological material, you can push the research up to a certain degree. And then you hit the wall. You cannot go further because you don't have the information. Well, it's not actually because, that's very vain, but if we had information about the organic remains, what they were cultivating, what animals they had, maybe we could be able to actually answer those questions with information for very specific sites and not general what the other pieces of information telling us. So I think that it's very important to incorporate archaeobotanical, not only archaeobotanical, but the organic remains, the animal bones, shells, fish bones, in the study of the households. And this situation, I mean, the lack of the organic remains research in Greece is surprising because the organic remains, and mainly the archaeobotanical and archaeozoological data, have been widely used in prehistoric sites. We sample everywhere in Greece during prehistory. And when you actually step into the Iron Age, that's it. We forget about it, and we don't do it, apart from very, very specific sites. And there are many reasons for that. It's not only the mentality of the classical archaeologists, and I don't mean anything bad, or maybe I do to a point, but that they don't want to sample. There are practical reasons as well. There's a lot of practicalities to take care of. And when you have at the back of your mind something says, yeah, but I have the written sources, yeah, but I have the epithi, I have the amphora, I know what's there, then you don't take the step further and actually do the research needed. And I'll tell you a small story for that, where I approached a very big archaeologist some years ago, that he's a director of a very, very long and old excavation in Greece. And I told him, well, let's do something about it. Let's sample the houses, from the classical to the Byzantine period. So he looked at me, and he said, so you want to do flotation? I said, yes. So he said, but heavy inscriptions do not float. And I'm like, okay, now I get you. But the good thing is that he did it. We have been sampling, well, it's the Athenian Agora. We have been sampling there for 5 years now. And he did it. He made the extra step. Well, I shouldn't say the extra step. I should say the step that he should make. But he did it. So there is hope. There is hope there. So for this lack of information for organic remains, a very good and unique opportunity to change the research agenda was created, because we had a big construction work in northern part of Greece. We were building a lot of roads when European money was floating in Greece. I don't know if you have heard, this is not the case at the moment. So a lot of construction work, so you had a lot of rescue excavations, and one of them, it was the new railway line connecting northern and southern Greece. So there was a lot of sites there, and I was lucky enough to be part of the excavation team, and I need to thank the director at the time, Pulaki, F. Pulaki. I was excavating, and I said to her, can we do something about it, because there are all these sites being dug. He said, oh, I don't know, and I don't care what you're doing after 3 o'clock. You can do whatever you want. So I did whatever I wanted. I started, we sampled a lot, and they were, another problem that you have, that you need to understand, and I'm sure if you're going to excavations, you have seen it, but especially in rescue excavations, they're so hectic. They say, oh yeah, we have this, we have to take soil now. We can't even collect the pottery, and we need to take the soil. So it's not only that they don't want to do it, but they need possibly a little bit of push. So because I was there, I was pushing them, and they did it. And we were sampling in different areas, as you will see. And when actually the plant remains started to float, the director, because she's a very clever woman anyway, she said, okay, stop excavating and do that. Whatever you're doing, take 2 workers and do it. And to give you an idea about practicalities as well, it took me 3 years to collect the samples that I needed for my PhD. And I was in a very, very lucky position, because I was there and I was getting paid to do that. In order to do a PhD in archaeobotany, and I'm sorry that if I make it sound terrible, but if you want to do a PhD in archaeobotany, you need to collect the material, because it's not like the pottery, here it is, a nice shirt, let's do something about it. You need to go to the excavation, take the soil, float it, see if you have material, because that's another case. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to do the plant remains from Itanos. And you go to Itanos, you sample, and you don't find anything. So there is a chance. But for a PhD project, no, we found Athena, don't laugh, we did find it. We did. I saw them during the summer, they were floating, I saw them. But imagine if you want to do a PhD, and you cannot say, okay, I'll focus in these 3 or 4 sites. You need to have the material to see if the material is enough to have any valid research question. So if you don't actually have been working before the start of the PhD to accumulate the material, forget it. Or if there is nobody, like nice ladies like me, that we have a lot of material and we can give it to master students to do actually a PhD, it's very, very difficult. So that was a small personal story anyway. So before we go further, I need you need to understand how plant remains are. And yeah, here is the area we're going to focus. Pieria, Mountain Olympus, gods there, this area of the world. And this is in Egypt, okay? And if you're an archaeobotanist there, you're very lucky. Whatever was brought in the site, you dry sieve it, everything is there, everything is preserved, because it's a desiccated material, okay? The same goes for these lucky people as well, that they're doing waterlogged material. And these are olive stones that they found in thousands in amphoras like that at the Mazotos shipwreck off the shores of Cyprus. So waterlogged material, whatever is in the amphora, you find it. And we have found some at the Spilio, which is the earliest lake site in Europe, really. But most of the times, what you find is carbonized. In Greece, the preservation that you find, and in most of the Mediterranean, what you find is carbonized material. And I mentioned that and I focus on that because you need to have in your mind that you need a fire or some sort of fire actually to have this kind of preservation. So if you're in a site and you go and a room hasn't been distracted by fire, okay? But you do find plant remains. You need to explain why they're there. And most of the times they are there because they're either cooking accidents, so you find them in hearths, or you find them the cleaning of the hearth and discard it somewhere else in the room, in pits outside of the houses, or their processing activities that they're used for fuel, or their processing activities that they're charred, they're end up in the fires because they're cleaning. So if you have a storage area, for example, and it's not affected by fire, but in the pithy, you find olive stones, for example. The olive stones are not what they were in the pithy, because you need, it's not in the primary deposition, I mean, because if the storeroom was affected by fire, why are they there? So you need to actually think that this is either an intrusion coming from upper layers, but certainly it's not of the primary deposition. So the pithos didn't have olive stored in it. Okay. Oh, so, and here, no, sorry. Now here you can see the flotation machine, and it takes a lot of time. It's good though, because you're close to the water, so it's not very bad, especially in the summer in Greece. And there you can see how the material comes out from the flotation. Okay, so you have the sieves. You put the material to dry, and then this is me, or well, an archaeobotanist looking at the microscope. Have you done flotation? One person, guys, you break my heart. Have you been to excavations that they're doing flotation?
Have you been to excavations?
Have you been to excavations? Yes. Anyway, if somebody wants to work with me, which clearly is an advantage, and if you want to actually come and to do flotation, please, yes, well, come anyway. So, 4 sites located in this area here. Here you can see 6 sites. I can't remember why, but there are 4 sites that we're going to talk about today. 3 country houses, Platania, Koboloi, and Duvari, and the site of CReA, which is the urban center, and it's actually a component of an ancient city of Iraklio. The sites are located on the first dry plain north of the Pinios River. Is a big river there connecting Thessaly with Macedonia, located on an alluvial soil. And I'm saying all this because you need to remember that they are located in a very, very fertile piece of land. So starting from the south, and the first one, this is the first site, the site of Platania. And the excavated building turned out to be one of the biggest country houses ever excavated in Greece. The site is located 4.5 kilometers southwest of the site of CReA, so the urban center, and that I will mention next, and very close to a possible location of another ancient city. So there are other urban centers around apart from CReA. And Koboloi, the other country house, is approximately 7 kilometers northwest of Platania, and I'm saying that so you can understand a little bit the area that we are talking about. And the farmhouse is dated from the late 4th to the early 3rd century for the first phase, and it was rebuilt shortly after its destruction. Today I will focus on the first habitation phase, which is contemporary with the other sites, and when the building was consisting of rooms around a courtyard, a typical Hellenistic house, and a storeroom was found in the northeast corner of the building, containing at least 26 pithi, some of them broken and repaired in antiquity. We have a tower in the middle. There is a pottery kiln, and there is a threshing floor outside. There are roofs to us around, so there you have a lot of external activities. It was, you have an enclosure on the north there, and it was excavated on the length of 32 meters, but we couldn't excavate more, so but it was much larger. This enclosure could have marked the territory of the country house and may have been used to keep animals, as the small structures, we have found small structures located, but we couldn't excavate them within the area of the enclosure, and maybe these were used as pens. And it could also have been an area of garden cultivation divided into small plots close to the site, or it would have been part of a field boundary system. All these external structures belong to the land of La Platania, used for cultivation or other reasons. And coarse and fine pottery made the majority of the finds, but we have small mortars, amphora, pithy, whatever you think that you'll find at the house, but in very, very large quantities. The presence of the kiln suggests that the occupants were making at least some of their pottery themselves. The tower could have been used for keeping the animals or for storing crops, but there were other areas for that reason in the farmhouse than the tower. It might have a defensive character, the tower, due to the location of the site near a corridor connecting Thessaly and Macedonia, where people could observe and react to the movements of groups traveling through, or perhaps on occasion ravaging the landscape. The building at Platania was 2,400 square meters, and if the external areas are included, the size is much greater, approaching really half a hectare. And Platania is certainly greater in comparison to the excavated farmhouses of southern Greece, which I showed you at the slide very briefly, which they measured something like 350 square meters. So 350, 2,500. So there's a big difference there. So possibly we should actually not describe Platania as a farmhouse, but it can go a little bit up in hierarchy, and possibly we can say that it's an estate and not a farmhouse. And these bigger country houses were used to them only for the Roman period. We know them like the Roman villas, but this is certainly something that is, at size at least, is closer to the Roman villa than the preceding classical farmhouses. And this is also the case for Koboloi and other that we're going to talk about, but other sites that have been located in Macedonia but haven't been excavated, but they're big. Coming now to the plant remains, we sampled everything, every possible context that it was secure was sampled. So the rooms, the external areas, the courtyard, and I'm not going to bore you with what we found. You can see it at the slide. But the thing that I would like you to remember is that there's a lot of diversity. You have a lot of cereals, you have pulses, you have nuts, you have fruits, and you have weeds as well, which is they come with the cultivation of cereals and pulses. The predominant cereal is mainly barley, which is it's a common thing for the classical period, and it occurs together with wheat. And because they have the similar processing, they can be grown together even in the same field. Pulses, they're only lentils and bitter veg. And I'm just going to mention bitter veg because it's a little bit ambiguous what it is used for. Bitter veg is toxic. I mean, if you, like grass pea. Have you heard these things before, like bitter veg, grass pea? No, well, I mean, we use them even now. They're not something that we used only in ancient times in Greece and in the Mediterranean. We have them now, and we grow them as fodder crops. Okay, so pulses, the lentils, we eat them. The bitter veg is a little bit problematic. Because it's toxic, it has been suggested that possibly it aimed for fodder, because animals do not react to that the way that humans do. But you can actually dilute the toxins that they have by boil it and boil it again. But it's a little bit of a hassle. So these things that they need all these further requirements, possibly you use them at the times of famine only. And there are cases in modern Greece during the Second World War where you had, because people had to eat something and they were eating a lot of bitter veg and graspy, and they became paralyzed. And the target group for that was, according to the sources, men around 40. So don't tell me, I don't know why, but they were paralyzed, the poor things, their limbs were paralyzed, and we have that. But on the other hand, graspy, for example, is hugely cultivated in Ethiopia, and they're all fine. So but have in mind that you have crops that they needed a lot more processing if it was intended for human consumption. And coming to the wheat category of the assemblage, you know, wheat is something that grows by itself, and we don't really cultivate it. And it is according to
Sorry, just to be sure, the bitter veg in Greek, how do you translate them?
Rovi. Rovi. Rovi, ναι.
Τι είναι ρόβι?
Rovi, ρε, τι να. Rovi, όχι ροβί. Rovi.
I don't know what it is in Greek, so I was asking to be able to translate it in French.
Αθηνά,
Yes.
go to the fields. I'll tell you, in the summer, we'll go around in the fields together and talk with the peasants, you know? Or how do you call it in English? Wenches, eh? The peasants.
That's something else.
Oh, is it? Okay. Anyway, yes, for example, they cultivate a lot of rovi, so in Greek, bitter veg, at Amorgos. Lathuri, the graspy, again at Amorgos, because they like harsh environments. That's they thriving at Ethiopia and Amorgos. I don't know if you have been. It's very nice, but it's very dry and stuff. So it's a little bit of a harsh environment. But we do have them. Κάτσε ρε Αθηνά, αυτή η ροβίτσα που είναι ένα μικρό πράγμα. Anyway, I'm very upset. Παιδί μου, πώς είναι. Τι σαν όσπρια, όσπρια είναι ρε Αθηνά, αφού το έχω και εδώ. Yes, but remember when you go somewhere, you find, this is not what Professor Tsigarida said. Don't eat it because it's toxic. Remember that? Okay, I thought. Anyway, so, what? Yes, we have ethnographic work undertaken in Greece and Turkey. That you have these ladies, they are pounding cereals, okay? The pounding cereals, so they release the grain from the chaff. That's what they're doing. And then they're winnowing it. And then they sieve it. Okay, so you have, like you see here, and it's more clear, you have very, very specific steps on cereal and pulses cultivation, but this is for cereal cultivation, from when it grows and you have to thresh it in the field to when it has to come to your plate or to your pithos to store it. Okay, so you have to thresh it, winnow it, the grain, okay? And then in every step of this sequence, threshing, winnowing, sieving again, and hand sorting, you have specific weeds produced. Okay, I'm just checking to see the eyes. All right, so at Platania, what we found, the weeds that we found, they belong to these areas here, I mean, to these stages. They're the byproducts of fine sieving and hand sorting. So the final stage, or the one stage before the consumption, is the fine sieving. So everything that you have there, the weeds that you don't want or the chaff that you don't want, it goes away. So you have the clean grain to store it. You store it, and when you want actually to consume it, you take the portion that you want to consume, and you go and you hand sort the cereals, all the pulses, from weeds that they have a similar size with the grains or the pulses. I'm sure your grandmothers have done it, no? Anyway, so at Platania, and why we're interested in that? Because if you see beyond that, you can actually see the human action there. Somebody has done that, and you find it, and it indicates that all the previous stages have been done not in the site, but in the fields. And this has information of how they're managing their agricultural produce, okay? Well, that was easy. So, the fruits, fruits, nuts, possibly they had almonds and fig trees around the site. Possibly they were cultivating them as well. They weren't like wild and go and gather things. Okay, they were having them by that time, and you had the grapes as well. Possibly a vineyard close to it. A very interesting for me find, because we don't find them very easily. We found complete figs, like complete ones. We do find them, but not. We found them mainly at funerary contexts, the complete figs. So they were possibly dry. So they were either put them on the roofs or somewhere and dry by the sun or in the oven. But when they do, it's a very good crop because product, because you can transfer it easily everywhere you want. But the majority of the remains, though, from Platania, which I didn't mention more, but I will mention now, they're olive remains. Wherever we had, wherever we sampled, in every sample you had olive remains, and when though the olive stones are a very common find in Greece from prehistory onwards. Okay, so you do find them. When though are numbering thousands, you need to interpret what they are. And you need to interpret what they are because, and when actually finding thousands in a specific context, because if you find some in one room and some in the other and stuff, this is a different story. But if you find in a specific context thousands of olive stones, you need to think further and possibly bigger. So either they're having huge parties and they were collecting the pits that they were actually eating, which I don't think they were doing, or you need to think what they were doing. And you need to see if these olive remains, if they're complete, so you have the whole olive stone, like those ones, or they're crushed. Okay, when they're crushed, then you have to think, okay, they're crushed because we did that during the excavation or the flotation, so they were crushed post-depositional, okay, or they were crushed in antiquity. And this is important because if they were crushed in antiquity, then there's an indication for an olive oil production, all right? Because the basic steps for olive oil production, and I'm sure that Professor Lebrun told you about last week. It's you crush the olives. Usually you crush it there in some kind of mill, but this is something from prehistoric Crete actually. But you have similar vats like that or press beds from classical and Hellenistic, even Roman period. So these are very difficult to date if you don't find them into a context. You crush them, you press them, and you don't have to press them really with a lever press, which is a big thing. And then, so you squeeze them really for the oil to come out. In some methods, you add water for more oil to come out. In other cases, you don't. People in Greece say that if you don't add water, your olive oil is much better. So maybe that's valid. But here, that's of course from a pictorial representation, but this is actually what you press and you have the oil. All right. So when you have crushed olive stones, you have to think that. So during my PhD, I looked at thousands of crushed olive stones to see the fracture pattern, how you do on pottery. Then you say, okay, this is modern or not modern. So I did that for thousands of olive stones. I wasn't eating olive for some years. Now I'm back. But so it was after that study, with the addition that in some samples we found a lot of pressed skin as well. So imagine the olive, when you press it, you have the skin as well. And then, that's something that it's very important to me anyway, that you have these things that I showed you earlier. These are identifiable at the archaeological record. If you find them, you think that this is certainly for olive oil production. The other one can be for wine production as well. So when you find them at the sites, you do know that you have some kind of this kind of activities. But olive oil, and that will go for the wine, is not only produced with this kind of things. You can have not installations, but equipment, if you like that. And to crush the olives, or you're not going to find that at an excavation. So sometimes we miss them, we don't find them, or we cannot identify them as such. And we need other means of trying to see what kind of agricultural activities they had. So, yes. After the work that I did, I found out that all these olive stones, not all olive stones, but many olive stones in specific contexts were actually the result of olive oil production. I need to point out that at Platania, we didn't find any installations connecting what I was saying on the basis of the archaeobotanical remains and what the archaeological record was saying, because we had no installations, no indication that we're actually producing olive oil there. So remember that if we haven't done the archaeobotanical work, nothing would have been done, and Platania would have been another farmhouse that we had in our minds, that possibly we had cereals and stuff like that, but we wouldn't have olive oil. And why is it important to see why you have olive oil? Because it's a completely different agricultural practice. It changes completely the economy of the site, and I'll come to that. How these ones were produced, were preserved, sorry, because we didn't have a fire at the site. So they were preserved because they were used for fuel, so they got preserved. So what they were doing is that they were producing olive oil in the site or outside, we don't know, keeping the residues, which is a lot, and using it for fuel. And that's why they got preserved. If they didn't use it as fuel, it wouldn't be preserved. And that's the end of it. And what I'm telling you about the taphonomy and how they get preserved, that doesn't go, of course, only for the classical period. It goes for the prehistoric as well, or any period. Okay. So residues of olive oil and the byproducts of the consumption, with the olive stones, I think that they were keeping almost everything for fuel, so they didn't waste many things. They were used as fuel on a regular basis. That's why we have all these the thousands of olive remains. And it makes sense because olive is great for fuel. It goes high to very, very high temperatures. That's why it's used for metal working as well, and produces very, very small amount of smoke. So it's very, very good for internal use as well. So in the houses, because it doesn't produce the smoke that you think it produces. So I'll come back to the lack of installations of why we didn't find. One reason, yes, the lack of installations, yes. I think that some of them they must have been located in the fields. So much of the work and the processing was in the fields. And that's something that it has been suggested for prehistoric Crete, and why we don't find a lot of installations, although we find the evidence for archaeobotanical remains. It's also possible that the production at the household level, as it was at Platania, was done with other apparatus, as I showed earlier, which was not the big installations that we expect to find, and they're very, very expensive to make. Or another reason of the lack of installation is that, and that comes actually from the ethnographic record, that different households were having the same equipment, and they were sharing the mill, for example, for the production of olive oil, because they didn't have such huge production to sustain the meal for one family. But let's think about what the plant remains tell us about Platania. It is because it has all this diversity that I showed you. Platania was produced for subsistence, so it was aiming for self-sufficiency. But it was also engaged in the cultivation of a cash crop, which is the olive. The diversity of the crops is one of the key characteristics of self-sufficiency, as it leads to the fuller use of the various different niches in the environment, and the work is spread more evenly throughout the year. And by growing a mixture of annual cereal and pulses with slightly different growth requirements and tolerances, so in different places and in different times, the farmers afford some protection against complete crop failure. So if you had a lot of bad weather, not everything that you were cultivating was going to be destroyed. Olive cultivation, on the other hand, involves a considerable capital investment because it goes not with, it doesn't not give immediate returns. You don't plant olive trees and you expect that you have olives or olive oil the next year. It takes several years, close to a decade or more, to actually have fruits that you can actually use. And the trees need to grow, and they need quite an attention and are sensitive to risks. And this cultivation is more suitable for specialization by better off farmers, so not the peasants, who can take risks and experiment, at least within the small-scale operation. Platania would therefore have sufficient capital, labor, and resources for the engagement in a non-specialized, but at some level of olive cultivation, along with the other agricultural activities, growing for their subsistence, but also produce for exchange and maybe a little bit of trade, but in what level of exchange and what level of trade, we don't know. Moving to the north, this is the site of CReA, which is the urban center. And the stratigraphic sequence found at the site is dated from the 3rd millennium to the BC to the 4th century AD. So it's a huge time span of use. The main Hellenistic period is dated from the last quarter to the fourth to the first quarter of the 3rd century, so contemporary with Platania. And various buildings belong to this phase, as you can see here. But I will focus on one building, which is the best documented, building Delta. And its size is approximately 100 square meters. And it's divided into different areas by interior walls, as you can see. Every room had a built hearth, the presence of which has been connected with kitchen complexes and heating in individual households at other Greek cities like Olynthos. The floor of it's made of pebbles, and it's very well made anyway. And there is a well at the north there at the building as well. It's possible that the entrance is at the east side, facing the road, but as you can see, it's not something that, it's not a typical house. It doesn't have the courtyard and the rooms around it, or it doesn't have a courtyard at all, okay? And the frequency of the building throughout its instructional area is impressive. Different types of cooking, serving and drinking pottery, very large quantities of transport amphora, a few large storage vessels, a lot of coins, so a lot of money was going around. And the well was originally used during the early Hellenistic period for water and was later transformed into a rubbish pit. It should be noted that the quantity of material forming the domestic assemblage is very large in comparison with the small size of the building, and much greater than the needs of a single household. In addition, the predominant types of pottery suggest cooking, serving, and drinking, but not much storage. And the cantharos, which is the drinking vessel of the period, we have found close to 150 in there, so they like their wine, possibly. The archaeobotanical samples, as you can see at the pie charts, and you can see at the list there, again, you have a lot of cereals and fruits and pulses and nuts. Only 2 samples there is there was concentrations, and it wasn't of a mixed. There wasn't mixed, but it was in concentrations of sesame and pine nuts, and they don't represent very common finds in Greek excavations. And all the seeds, they were all mixed up in the floor of the building. I think that they present the raw materials to be used as ingredients for the creation of various meals, and fruits and nuts to be eaten raw. And cereals and pulses could be cooked in basic and simple ways, roasted or just boiled, and possibly could be consumed like that in the building. And the evidence for storage is only coming in a very, very small scale, only for the sesame and the pine concentration. And sesame seeds were almost exclusively used as food, but they're also known for their oil extraction, but I don't think that that's the case here. But sesame, where olives do not grow, you have sesame to have the oil because you don't have the olives. And during the harvest, it's very interesting actually how they do it, because it's a lot of time consuming. The plants are cut and stacked in upright position, and as they dry the capsule, the capsule split open like that. And that's why we have the open sesame expression, because they do that. And how the seeds were prepared for human consumption provides a valuable clue of how these entered at the archaeological record. It's very, very simple. You just put them in hot water, and then you can eat them. So it doesn't need a lot of cooking. And according to written sources, sesame cakes were connected with specific social events, such as weddings, and they were offered, that I like best, that they offered as prizes to people who stayed up all night at symposia. Because imagine, they were drinking the previous night, and the next morning they wanted something sweet. So this is the sesame cake to actually get the alcohol out of their system, I think, anyway. Pine nuts also are edible, and of course, you know, I'm sure that you're eating roasted pine nuts with your food. I keep mentioning these two crops because, not only because we don't find them very easily, but they're not part of, meaning you can live without them. That's what I mean. It's not like the core food component. So possibly they were using it for flavoring mostly, or because they're not all over the place. It's not like part of the other food. They were like stored somewhere. And because sesame and not all, sesame according to the written sources, but pine is connected with a lot of funerary context in Greece as well. Actually, this is the first domestic context that we have found it from Greece. The rest that we have found during the Hellenistic period are funerary, or we have found it in altars as well. So there is something else. So either they were selling them, maybe, or they were using it in special occasions. And recently, we have found them at the altar of Zeus at Mountain Lycion, which is an altar that goes actually from the Neolithic to the Roman period with continuous use. So they were deposited there, which is a ritual context. Other organic remains that they have found, we have thousands of shells, thousands of animal bones. Nobody has studied them. The only thing that has been studied other than the plant remains are fish bones that had a lot of catfish, a lot of soles, a lot of small fish, but even sharks. So you have small fish and big fish. So they were going and fishing in the sea, but also at the rivers around the site. So they were exploiting everything they could. Now, in current research, when we find buildings with very rich pottery assemblages, and I'm talking about, of course, the classical period, and organic remains, like we have found at CReA, they have been connected with wealthy houses, large-scale non-domestic dining, and eating, as is the case of the house 7 at Halys, or with the ritual dining such as the sanctuary of Demeter and Kore at Corinth, or the tavern, actually, of Aphrodite at Corinth. And this is how they have been interpreted up to now because of mainly the pottery that they have been found. Recently, they have been interpreted as capilla, as taverns. Capilla were public bars. There were public bars in villages and cities that offered wine and food to the public. And the places and the food were modest and frequented by ordinary people, while private parties and the symposium remained largely aristocratic. So you have the symposium for the elite and the wealthy, and you have the capilla and the taverns for the rest of us. So another role of the capillo is not only eating, but casual drinking. And this is an important addition considering the major role of sociable but not ritualized wine drinking as was at the symposia. And this is indicated by the large quantities of drinking vessels that we have found at the building Delta at CReA. By the 5th century, there was an extensive drinking culture supported by shops and local markets and foreign trade. And similar residues of urban taverns, if you want to call them, have been found at Delos and Mytilene on the basis of pottery and animal bones. But this is the first time that we can interpret something like a tavern or a capillot, call it whatever you like, on the basis of the archaeobotanical remains. And in this building, food was produced and cooked and consumed. And maybe it was connected with the harbor. There was a lot of people in the harbor area that would go and use it for food and drink. And let's move to the next, Let's move to the next site, which is the site of Koboloi. Before I say anything about Koboloi, this is the most well-studied site. That's why you're going to see a little bit 2 or 3 slides more for the finds, because it has been studied. The rest hasn't been studied, the material, that much. And it's situated 2.5 kilometers north of the CReA, and the size is big as well. It's not as big as Platania. It's something like 1,304 and 1,400 square meters. And you can see that there's the living quarters here, and there on the left there is the storage area. And because we didn't excavate it, but we found that it was going towards towards east, so it was much bigger. The rooms to the south and west were probably residential for auxiliary staff, and perhaps also for animals, because we found nothing there. The main workshops in the room were the stores around the courtyard and outside. There was a built basement was excavated on the eastern side of the house, indicating the presence of a tower. There was a strong evidence, and you can see the mud bricks, how they have fallen. It was quite impressive. And you have a lot of burning, and we found a lot of gray pips in the living quarters. And then have a lot of agricultural tools that you see there. And that's just for people that they do pottery, like Vicky and Athena, who might like to see these things. But that's about it. And you have a lot of pithi. They're huge, the pithi. And at the courtyard and outside the the storage area, and outside the storage area, we have a total of 32 very big pithi. When we estimated the volume that of the product that you could store in, it's something like 2,200 liters. So they're huge. And actually, you can see there some of them and how we think that they have been arranged around the courtyard. And this is the pithos. So they're quite big, and there are 32 of them. And you have a lot of letters in the rims, but we don't know what's for, unfortunately. But again, and here you have outside, yes, there is a series of ditches outside. And because we found their burnt wood, it was burnt wood actually of vine, so we think that there was a vineyard just outside the farmhouse. But wherever we sampled, the vast majority was grape remains, and we found very few quantities of the living quarters for cereals, wheat and barley, some lentils, almonds, and that was about it. And everywhere we sampled, we had grape pips. So we have grape pips from the pithos, inside the pithos, from the storage area. And they were preserved because the storage area, the roof has collapsed, and they have been preserved because of the fire that it was created. So you have there a primary deposition, okay? But then we have plant grape remains at the courtyard, at the living quarters, and in the ditches outside the farmhouse, and I'll tell you later why I think it's that. But you need to interpret these as with the olives. Why do they mean when you find grape pips in thousands? Okay, So I'm sure all of you know how wine is produced. You just step on them and like, the must flows. But as you see here, and it's something that it's done even now, still, I mean, it's done now, you sieve them. You sieve the grapes, because imagine the grapes, you press them, you have a lot of skin, you have a lot of pips. You don't want either the skins or the pips, okay? You just want the must. So you want to filter it, so you have only the liquid. And again, as with the olive oil production, you can produce wine without the installations that you think that you will use, like you see here. And this is traditional grape processing in Greece. So you have the treating vat, and there they put a plank on top, so the mast runs, and this is actually very, very strong. So they collect this before they start pressing or treating really the grapes, because it has very high it's very high in alcohol, and they put it to the wine later. And as that gentleman does there, they put a basket, so the pips and the skins are retained. Okay, so this sequence, as we said, for crop processing, for the cereals and the weeds, you can reconstruct actually these levels and these stages in the archaeobotanical record. So if you're in this stage, which is like treating, you have a pressing vat, and then what you expect to find archaeobotanically in the archaeological record is a lot of pips, a lot of skins, and a lot of pedicels. If you go a step further and you have sieved that, okay, you expect to find less, almost nothing of the big pedicels, okay, and you have only pips and skin. And if you go to the last stage, to the last step of the processing, which is actually goes into the pithos to ferment, the only thing that is going to escape from the process, okay, is grape pips and some pedicels. So when you have at Komboloi huge accumulation of grape pips and some pedicels there, you come to the conclusion that what was stored in the pithy of the storage room was actually wine. And the grape pips have escaped the sieving. All right? And this, if you think that we're talking about 2,200 to 2,000 to 300 liters, if you find some accumulation of grape pips in the bottom, you expect actually to find, because we're talking about a huge amount of liquid. All right? There. Well, I said that. But is what you actually get into each stage. All right? So if you find that it's possible archaeobotanically to find these steps, not only the last one, but you can find grapes with skins indicating that it haven't been filtered. Okay? Oops. And the thing that intrigues me anyway is that we found a lot of grape pips in the ditches outside the farmhouse. And then there again, you need to see how did they end up there. I think that they end up there because they were burned as fuel, and then when the hearths were cleaned, they were put into the ditches for manure. It's something that we do in Greece, other Mediterranean countries as well. During Easter, where we have a lot of fires because of the roasting of the lambs, then we have the ashes, and we go to the olive groves or the vineyards and put it there because it's very good for the soil. So I think that they were doing that they were using again the fuel as manure. Otherwise, we wouldn't find them there. And that's a great example, I think, for what we're missing from what's going on outside the limit of the site, because we wouldn't see this extra use, if you like, with this if we hadn't excavated the ditches. And the last site is the site of Duvari, which is it's a completely different story. It's much smaller. We don't know. We could find only its limits, but it was destroyed by construction work, so you couldn't really say many things. But it was something around 300 square meters, so nothing like the two other country houses. There again, we found a lot of grape pips, but in thousands inside a pithos. So most likely it was, again, wine, but certainly nothing to do with the level and the quantities of koboloi. We have found a strainer as well, which is connected with wine production. As you can see on the slide there, the ethnographic parallels, lots of them. And we found around the site there a linos, a treating vat, but because it was in the fields, you cannot know if it was connected with that or it was something different, or you cannot even date it. What I want to say for koboloi is that koboloi had the labor and the facilities to actually sustain wine production, because you have to think that you have maybe to have in your mind that yes, wine production is very laborious, and it is. It's the peak activity of the agricultural year to trade the grapes for the wine. But in order to have good grapes, you need to attend the vineyard in many ways, by digging, pruning, digging again. It needs a lot of attention if you want to produce, if you have to have a good produce. So if we go and think that koboloi was actually specialized in wine production, most likely for trade, you don't produce this 32 huge pithos. If you don't do some level of trading, then you need to consider that they had the people doing it, okay, the land as well, that they were doing, that they could cultivate to produce this amount of wine. And here is just a picture to see what are the key months of the attention that the grapes need. And I'm not going to read more. So let's go back and see what you learned, hopefully, today, or what I bored you with. You have Platania, okay? You have a big farm, country house. They're producing a little bit of everything because they are aiming for subsistence. They have a little bit of olive oil production on the side, so maybe they can have, they're a little bit better off. What you see, and this is something that you actually expect for the Hellenistic period, and what we think that the country houses, how the country houses were operating. And then you have koboloi, which koboloi is a completely different story, because it specializes in that. Even if they were in wine production, even if, and I'm sure they did produce other things, I don't think that they were getting everything from other farmhouses or other areas. Their main focus was that. So they either were very well off, okay, and they were producing certainly for the market. We have to think that when you have a market-oriented economy, you need the favorable conditions as well. And Koboloi has these conditions because there are other urban areas around. And you have CReA, which is a harbor city. So there, you can actually channel your product. At CReA, during the excavation, this is not published, they have found, yes, of the Menthi amphora. Menthi is an area opposite, actually, where the area we're talking about, hugely important in antiquity for their wine. Okay, if you find almost a mold, yes, that they're actually putting the Menthian stamp, and you find it at CReA, I would say that maybe some of the wine that they claim that they produced at Menthi was actually produced at Koboloi, went to CReA, put it in the amphora, and shipped from there as Menthian wine. Yes, and it changes how we view things. The other thing that the role that Koboloi might have was that because you have Duvari, okay, which is a very, very small thing, you will need to consider who is living there. Maybe you have people that they're working at Koboloi, working the fields of Koboloi, and they stay at Duvari. So it doesn't mean that it's permanently occupied. It can be seasonally occupied. You might have people that they're actually peasants and they rent it to go and to work the fields. Both at Koboloi and Platania, because they are such large estates, and when you're engaged, especially with the vine, and it's what you're actually doing, you don't leave this country house and you just leave. So what we talk about, what's the permanent, or who is living there? The owner might live in another city, but certainly somebody was actually staying there all the time to manage the agricultural activities. The other thing that I want to say, and actually close with that, is that I started with a little bit pessimistic, if you like, comment about classical archaeology and how it goes in Greece. And it's not only in Greece, it's in the Mediterranean in general, that we don't have information. The picture has changed a lot. And because people excavators have understood that we cannot actually hit the wall all the time. We need to go a step further. And you have new projects, like old projects like the Athenian Agora and Corinth, that they're doing such things. But you have Azorias in Crete, Dryros in Crete as well. You have Knossos, which is actually not, you don't connect it with the Neolithic and the Bronze Age Knossos, but there's the Hellenistic Knossos that they're digging at the moment. And it would be the first time that we go for that direction at Knossos and other areas. You have Iron Age excavation like Oropos, that we're doing a lot of work there. You have Hellenistic ones that they have started now, and Byzantine ones like Thebes. Itanos is the first archaic site that we're doing things at the moment. So everything is changing. And I think that in 5 years from now, I'll come back and bore you, and we'll talk about how things have changed, because many things would have come out by then, many publications. The other hopeful thing as well, to me anyway, is that we have gone beyond the domestic. We sample things and contexts and sites that they're not domestic. And we sample altars, we sample temples, we sample funerary sites, cemeteries, and there the plant remains say a completely different story. So when you go an excavation next and you don't see a flotation machine, be upset. Or try to persuade the excavator to actually build one. And as excavators, you need to remember that you will be at some point, I hope, you need to remember that we need they need a little bit of a push, the plant remains. They're the ones from organic remains, they're more invisible ones. The animal bone, you see it. The fish bones, sometimes the big ones, you see them. You don't see the plant remains, apart from the olives. That's why they're big, and some people collect them and do that because you can see them. So when you're at excavation, remember me doing that, imagine a small seed having a flag, saying, oh, here I am, get me to light, or make me float or something. Otherwise, it's not going we're not going to have this kind of information. And I think this is it. And it's time for a beer, since we're in Belgium. But if we were at Koboloi, we were having parties like that. So thank you very much.